Hi everybody, this is Maya and this is a experience review type video. I went to the Napa Valley Writers Conference last week and I got back yesterday, and I've really been trying to process just how much I learned in one day. I came back really exhausted. I was starting to get a cold and I felt like my brain had just been squeezed for 6 days. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about why I chose that conference, what my experience was like, and what I got out of the conference. Because um, I will say that that conference changed my life. I am a different person now than I was when I went to the conference. And that's something that I want to talk to you about because I feel like, as writers, when we talk about going to a writers' conference, a lot of times the writers' conferences that we talk about are conferences where we meet other writers, we meet agents, we talk about how to market our work. Um, and I feel like some people may skip or just overlook some of the craft based conferences. And quite frankly, I feel like I got a tremendous amount out of going to the Napa Valley Writers Conference as far as my craft. And also, I will say, as far as finding my tribe, it's the first time where I've walked into a place and I felt like I I fit in. Really, it was a very different sensation than I am uncomfortable around a lot of people. I used to be less so. I can do my facade thing for work if necessary, but to walk into a room and feel awkward and look around and know that other people are feeling awkward and to have like a rapport with people and to feel comfortable in that was a new sensation for me. And it's something that I will never forget because I met some amazing, special people that I will be keeping in contact with going forward. And so let me just talk a little bit about how the Napa Valley Writers Conference is structured. There's two sections. There's the poetry section and the fiction section. So the people that were in the poetry portion of the conference, every day they would go into their workshops and they would workshop poems that they had written that evening. So over the course of 6 days, they wrote 6 or 7 poems, and it was a generative workshop. In addition to being a craft based workshop, in addition to the workshop hours, there were lectures in the morning. Most of the poetry lectures were in the morning. Most of the fiction lectures were in the afternoon. So people in the poetry program, they pretty much woke up, turned in a poem, went to a lecture for a while, and then immediately went to workshop. Uh, and then I was in the fiction workshop. Now, people that are in fiction or poetry workshops, while you're there, you can only be in one workshop, but you are able to listen to all the lectures. So while I was there, I listened to all the poetry lectures except for one. I was so exhausted. There was one I missed. And unfortunately, it was one I actually really wanted to go to. Um, and in the evening, there were readings to go to, and the readings were at various locations. The first one was there on the campus. The rest of the readings were at various wineries around the general area. So for fiction, I went to my workshop after the poetry lectures. And during our workshop, it was not generative. It was run like an MFA program workshop, I guess. Pretty much 3 weeks before the 3 weeks before the conference, we all turned in the work that we were going to workshop during the conference. And so we had 3 weeks to read everyone's work. There were 12 people total, so we had 3 weeks to read 11 pieces of work and notate them. And then when we went in to the workshop, we would look at what we could do to these individual pieces to make them better and really just hash out everyone's stories. In my particular workshop, we had 4 people doing short stories and 8 people doing novels. So I was able to get the first 2.5 chapters workshopped in my novel passed, and it was a huge help. Um, One of the things that's really been hard for me as far as knowing where to go next was a sense of lack of direction. I knew what I wanted the book to say. I knew what I wanted it to look like in the end, but I didn't know how to get from here to there. And I looked at various revision classes and stuff, and a lot of them are really focused uh, on genre work, which is great because it helps me clean up plot and clean up like a lot of the really core like technical stuff, but it wasn't helping me with the language and with what Sam would call the through line, the emotional through lines, and my tension. I wasn't clear on my tension, and I knew I wasn't clear, and so I stopped revising because I didn't know what to do, essentially. And so before I turned in my 2.5 chapters, I thought I edited them. I retyped them up and proceeded to put more typos in them that I didn't find until day 3 of the conference. That was a little embarrassing. Um, but pretty much they were rough. They were very rough. The other people in the workshop, all extremely talented, very clearing work, and they were able to really look at my first 2 chapters and show me what I was doing right, which was something I wasn't expecting. I spent so much time trying to figure out what I needed to learn, what I needed to fix, that I hadn't actually looked at my work and said, what am I doing good? And and I like that about how Sam ran her workshop. She had this theory that all work has problems, like all novels have problems, all short stories have problems. And yeah, fixing your problems is good, but even more so, it's important to know what you do well and then take it to the next level. And that's what the workshop did for me. They were able to point out what I was doing well and give me ideas on how to take it to the next level. They also were able to show me things where things were being read a certain way that I wasn't expecting. And some of those ways were good, some of those ways weren't. And so I was left with a series of decisions and clarifications that I knew I needed. I pretty much have a big long laundry list of where to start with my revision, which to me is priceless. It's absolutely priceless. At one point, Sam looks at me and she says, the tension, it's hit and miss. She says, what you need to do is you need to read Carol and the Talented Mr. Ripley and Devil in a Blue Dress, because this is suspense. This needs to have tension similar to like a thriller novel. You need to get the reader in and keep them there throughout the course. And I hadn't thought about it in that direction. The novel very much is a personal journey novel, but she's right. There are elements of the novel that are very thriller-esque, and I can use those techniques in my novel to maintain tension. And it was this big, huge light bulb moment that just pretty much knocked me upside the head. And I was like, really? How come I didn't see that kind of moment? Everyone, picked their workshop leader. And I think we were exceptionally lucky that most of the people got who they wanted. Um, there were a number of teachers there, and this is the one thing I would say, and I'm going to do a video later on tips for doing this type of workshop. But the most important tip I can give you is to read the teacher's work. So if you're looking at going to a craft-based workshop, you don't have to read all their work, but, go over some of their work and see whose writing is similar to what you're wanting, or listen to their lectures and see, what are their theories? How do they approach writing? And that will help you narrow down the teacher you want. And I found it in particular, very interesting that the different teachers had different feels in their classrooms, and they tended to attract a different type of student. So we ended up with a really close class, I guess is the short way of saying. There were points in the workshop where rather than feeling like we were all there workshopping each other's pieces so that we could become better writers, it felt like as we were workshopping each other's pieces that every person there was emotionally invested and cared about the other people's stories. And that was something I hadn't expected. It was a very supportive environment. Um, and I grew a lot as a writer, both in techniques and theories and things that I've been exposed to, but also in my sense of self and understanding who I am as an artist. Um, Knowing that I'm a writer, accepting that I'm a writer, accepting that I write literary fiction, that was the first step. Going to this conference was like confirmation that I was on the right road. It was confirmation that I was in the right place, that I had found my tribe, um, and that I belonged there. Going into something like that, you feel a little bit like an imposter. You're like, yeah, they accepted me, but what if that was my one good story? What if I'm really a horrible writer and everybody's better than me? Well, I walked into this workshop and everyone else's work was much cleaner than my work. My work was one step away from being a rough draft. And that was embarrassing, but it was good. And people respected me for being willing to bring in such early draft, for saying, I don't know where I'm going with this and I need help on the worst part of the book. And I felt like I was supported. I didn't feel like I was a bad writer. I actually left feeling like I was a very good writer and that I had some real strengths in those chapters that I need to expound upon. And in addition, you know, um, I was able, because I was so comfortable, I was able to get out of my, emotional comfort zone and approach people and ask for advice on what to do next, on where I should point myself as far as learning craft and becoming a better writer and eventually becoming a professional writer. And that was really nice that I could walk up to a teacher and say, hey, I want to talk to you about my future. Do you have 5 minutes? And have them sit down with me and talk to me and have them be so willing to do that was wonderful. I also really loved, if you can get to a writer's conference where there's poetry and fiction, the cross-pollination of ideas during lunches and downtimes. Don't just hang out with the fiction writers. Go and talk to the go and talk to the poets. Go and listen to some of the poetry lectures. I learned just as much from listening to the poetry lectures as I did from listening to the fiction lectures. And not just because I write poetry. Like, I learned things from the poetry lectures that I'm going to be using in my novel as far as minimalism and creating impact through opposites and things like that. Those are all things that are transferable skills, you know? So talk to the other genres in your workshop. Um, Go out afterwards, but get your sleep. I was really lucky. I stayed with a host family, and they were wonderful. Oh my goodness, they were absolutely wonderful. It was this tiny little house. It was full of art, and both of them were artists. And every time I would go to their home after workshop, I would just be burnt out. And even if I didn't sleep well because my brain was just racing, 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 like I would lay down and my brain would be replaying all these things that I had learned. And there were a couple nights that I literally couldn't sleep. But even on those nights when I couldn't sleep, I was able to relax and clear my head so that the next day I was able to absorb more information. And I do know there were a couple people who didn't have that ability to just process at the end of their day, and it was much harder for them to attend as many lectures as I was able to. And I think the reason why I was able to attend all the lectures except for one is because at the end of every day I was able to just brain dump and just process and let go and prepare my mind for the next day. I did start to get a little sick. Emergency saved my conference, I must say. And when I came home, it got a little worse, but I've just been pounding emergency all day and I feel a ton better. So let me just show you what I received from the conference. Um, as far as like tangible things, I was able to get a bunch of literary journals, which is great because as I'm sending out short stories and stuff, you really do need to look at the journals that you're sending out to. And so I was able to pick up some journals that I had been considering sending work to that really weren't available online, which is nice. But then I have here is my stack of manuscript notes from the various people in my class. So what you're looking at here are 11 letters. Well, 12 because of Sam. So I keep saying Sam. My teacher was Sam Chang. She wrote Inheritance, Hunger, and Nothing is Forgotten, Nothing Lost. And she's the director of the Iowa Writers Program. And so she wrote a letter on my first couple chapters. Such great notes. Oh my goodness. Such great notes. I learned so much from her. But in addition, there were so many talented writers in my workshop. I learned a lot from them. And a bunch of them, in addition to just taking notes on the manuscript, they actually would give me a letter, like breaking down what they thought that the manuscript needed, what was strong and what was weak. And so, what I'm going to be doing over the next probably 3 days is going through each of these and making a list of kind of like a to-do list, ranking all the changes that I want to do and then ranking them from the biggest, most overreaching changes to like small shit. And then I'll start working on it. And I think that by having that checklist, Sam recommended the checklist method because I had tried to go through the whole manuscript for one thing and then go through the whole manuscript for another thing, and it really wasn't working. And so I think having this checklist and doing it chapter by chapter, and then once all the chapters are done, then go through it as a whole, I think that may actually be a better technique for me. So that's what I'm going to try. But that's a ton of notes on how to make just the first 2 chapters of my book better. Ton of notes. In addition, whoa, there were so many times during the conference that a book would be recommended to me. A poet would be recommended to me. So many things, my workshop leader, she recommended some books, but she wasn't really recommending craft books, which I appreciated. She recommended several novels that had things in them that she thought would help me with my novel. And she did the same for other people in class. So I took a lot of notes on those. Antonia Nelson, she gave a wonderful talk on To Kill a Mockingbird, Go Set a Watchman, and The Member of the Wedding. And so I plan on reading all 3 of those books. I've just got this huge list of my TBR list has just been completely hijacked, really, is what it amounts to. Just completely hijacked. In addition, I have a list of things that would be good for me after my son goes to college as far as preparing myself for a writing career and deciding whether to get an MFA or whether to do fellowships. And so I have I have a rough draft roadmap of what one of the teachers thought would help me progress the smoothest while also traveling, which was huge because I want to travel. I don't want to spend 6 years of my life in academia and then I still haven't frickin' traveled. I already set it aside when I had the kids. I do want to travel. And so that was huge. And I have to say, the whole time, I felt so inspired. I felt inspired by so many people, by just the level of energy and communication. And, a lot of our class, we had a really, really good demographic mix in our class. And at one point, we went out to a bar, and you know, a bunch of us minority students were sitting around arguing over the term Oreo and race and literature and Gino Diaz, and it was just so electric, so just absolutely amazingly electric. And I made a couple friends that I'm going to keep in contact with for the rest of my life. And I made a group of people that I appreciate, that they're going to be able to hand me their manuscripts and I'll be able to hand them mine. And they have aesthetics that I respect and that are similar enough that they'll be able to give me good feedback and I'll be able to learn and give them good feedback. And all of that as a writer, having that sense of community, it's really everything, and I didn't realize just how, like, I knew it bothered me that locally I didn't know anybody that wrote literary fiction. Everybody I know writes genre fiction. And it kind of bothered me being the only one because I feel like sometimes I'm paying attention to things that are very different from what they're paying attention to. And on one side, I think it's good because literary fiction has been going through a lot of issues right now. And I think we have a lot to learn from genre fiction, both indie and traditional, as far as how to stay alive in this new world environment. But to walk into a room full of writers who, even if they're writing other types of fiction, are coming at it from a very literary bend and they're really wanting to dive into their work. They're really wanting to pay attention to those teeny tiny details. And then they think they're all important and they're willing to put in that time. I listened to a woman read, and she read one page, and it was like the first time I read The Color Purple, or the first time I picked up Anna Karenina. Like, it blew me absolutely out of the water. And I looked at her and I was just like, wow, you wrote that. And when we talked afterwards, she had been working on that for 15 years. And so many people would say that's a waste of time. And she could have finished it like ages ago, but it wouldn't have had that effect on me because it was a masterpiece. And when she finishes it, it's going to be at the same caliber of some of the greatest writers. And to spend 15 years on one project, like, that just blew me absolutely away. Here I am. I've got 2 rough draft novels. I've got slews of short stories. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, if I had to spend 15 years on one project, my characters might kill me. They literally might just kill me. But her level of dedication was just very amazing and powerful and inspiring to me. And it made me think about some of my poems that I wrote a decade ago that I still pull them out every now and then and debate a comma. And then I think I'm silly for doing that. And now I don't think I'm so silly. Now I think that's part of doing the work. And I'm recognizing there's many different ways of doing the work. And that this way of doing the work is a way that I love. I really love it. I had someone earlier ask me if I make money for my writing or if it's just a hobby. And I proudly say neither. I will eventually make money from my writing. I will become a professional writer. I will be published. My book will be on bookshelves. I don't have any doubt on that. I don't have any doubt on that because the difference between a successful writer and an unsuccessful writer is a successful writer doesn't give up. So no, I have no doubt on that. But it's not a hobby either, just because I'm not making money right now. Right now, I am apprenticing. I'm studying, I'm taking notes, and I'm polishing, and I'm working really hard. And that's not something that I've been so freely willing to say out loud. But I'm willing to say it now. I'm working really hard. I'm reading and I'm pushing myself. And I have to take breaks between books that I read because I have to process them. And I am embracing my marginalia. And I am embracing my gazillion drafts of a 3,500 word story. When I take 6 months to revise a story and I go through 11 full revisions before I even get to copywriting, I'm proud of that because I know that story is amazing compared to where it was. And after a couple more revisions, it's probably going to be even more amazing. And I know that I'm capable of this. I know it. So I don't, when people say, is it just a hobby? No, it's not. It's not something that I do just because I love it. A hobby is an amazing thing that you do because you love it. But it's more than that. I do it because I love it. I do it because I can't not do it. And I do it because the work demands it. I wrote a story. It's an amazing story. My characters deserve, they demand that I do the work. So I'm doing the work. And that's what it's all about. It's about doing the work. It's one of the things that made me fall in love with the novel All Is Forgotten, Nothing Lost is the line, all that matters is the work. When I read that, it was like, wow. Maybe I'm insane, but there's other insane people that are thinking the same thing, so it's all good. So yeah, I loved it. I'm going to do a short video. It'll probably take a little bit of time because I would like to keep it really short of top 5 tips for getting through a craft-based workshop. But until then, I highly encourage you to think about a craft-based workshop, regardless of what genre of writing you do. I think that you can get so much from it on an emotional level and on a craft-based level that you really shouldn't overlook it. And yeah, there are lots and lots of shiny workshops that, have all kinds of marketing stuff and maybe have one craft class or 2 craft classes. But to go someplace where your entire week is just focused on getting better, that is an invaluable experience, and it's definitely changed who I am, and I'm glad it has. I like who I am right now. I am an artist who's growing, and that is freaking awesome. So that is my quick video review talk. I'm still coming off of this, so I'm sure this is pretty rambly, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Ciao.